discussions or thoughts about that, and also on the other side, talk about diagnosis and intervention that happens at that time.
Sure. So on the diagnosis method, we think there's two primary levers to pull. One is increasing parent demand, and the other is increasing physicians' willingness to make a diagnosis. Those are the two biggest barriers. And with parents, I think our thinking around this has been it's really like campaign targeted at these segmented audiences. That you need those reminders. You're not paying attention to this until you're worried, right? Until you think you're seeing something, you're not, as a parent, looking for this. So our idea is to try some more novel approaches. I'll give you an example of what we'd love to do. In that 12 to 24 months, there's certain things that parents are doing quite frequently. There's products that they're interacting with, diapers, as an example. So imagine we look out and we say, hey, we the lower socioeconomic population, what kind of diapers is the most used brand for that group? And then working in partnership with that manufacturer to make sure that those signs, what you should be looking for, are printed there. So you're seeing that reminder constantly. So it's not, you have to be watching, it's just that interaction with what your day looks like. So it's just a tiny example of that increasing, going right to the parents themselves, because I think that they know the best at noticing that. And then on the physician demand, one of the things that we're finding in all these conversations with healthcare providers is that one of the barriers to making a diagnosis, not the only one, but one of them, is a lack of knowledge about the resources that are available. That the physician doesn't have to take on the whole burden of care. There's actually people who can do that, but there's a lack of knowledge about that. And so educating physicians about the, here's how you work in partnership once that happens, that we really think that that'll help to increase that diagnosis rate. So those are just examples of some of the novel ways we're looking at some of this.
Right. I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that you've got some ideas about doing something for the near term on this incredibly important area, because we all know that the earlier that we get interventions going in children, the better the outcomes are going to be.
Yeah. And then on the intervention side, I'll just give an example. One of the things we've been working on the global scale is parent constraint. That maybe there's the opportunity to, while you're certainly want to make sure there's more public services available as well, and working on whatever that looks like, mostly from an advocacy side probably, but also increasing parent self-efficacy, and so that some of that intervention can be done even as waiting for more publicly available things.
And so hopefully we'll talk about when we get to scientific advances. There are some recent, studies about in the space methods to increase parent engagement and intervention. So that's a promising area from the perspective of having interventions that have good data work that one can then try to implement through the kinds of campaigns that you're talking about. Other questions from the committee? And do you have a timeline for some of these efforts to get forward, or versus waiting on the scientific team?
Some of the science stuff will be waiting on the team, but lots of the other work for the strategic plan isn't science-based. And so our fiscal year starts, our new year started January 1, and so we're hard at work in implementing our business plan. And if there's anything that I talked about today that was intriguing to you, or things you wanted to learn more about, if you have an idea in what we can do, please feel free to reach out to me anytime, or any of my team. We're excited to work together.
Sorry, can you use the microphone?
What's the timetable for getting the chief science officer in place? I am very hopeful that it's very soon. I think first quarter for sure.
All right, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate hearing about the wonderful efforts you've been doing to refocus the organization. And it sounds like you're got a really promising start. We look forward to working with you to seeing those mission objectives come to fruition.
Great. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, next up I'm going to ask Dr. Larry Wexler from the Department of Education to introduce our next speaker.
Good morning. I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce someone who we have in the Department of Ed have funded over a number of years. My shop handles the discretionary grants program under IDEA, and we have a large technical assistance investment across the disability spectrum. But we have a saying in our shop that regardless of the state of the research, the school bus pulls up every day, and those children are left off at school, and teachers have to work with them, early interventionists have to work with them, and we have to do the best we can. So when we fund a technical assistance center, we never fund it with the idea that we have the answers. We're going to, that there are a lot of empty heads out there, and this new center with, well-known professionals and academics are going to fill those empty heads with the right answers. We have a large knowledge development component of all of our technical assistance centers, and what we tend to do is we start with whatever evidence base we have. We begin to work with states and districts. Based on those interactions, the evidence base changes. We change what we're doing in an iterative process. We funded about 8 years ago, a National Autism Professional Development Center, and that went to Frank Porter Graham. The same other was the director of that center. In the knowledge development piece, the first thing they did was a meta-analysis of interventions that were out there for kids with autism, and they did a really nice job. And over the with an extension of 6 years, they did some tremendous work in the field. But at the end of their funding cycle, they updated their meta-analysis, and things over a 5-6 year period, certainly we all understand, have changed dramatically. So what we were left with in the department was a new analysis, but with no way of really disseminating that analysis in a way that was actually helpful to people who provide services to kids and families. So we legally, let me just reinforce that, we legally were able to supplement a grantee about $500,000 to have this meta-analysis as modules that have been developed updated. Sam Odom runs this program and has created with his team 27 new completely free, downloadable modules that he's going to chat about, as well as some other work. So we're really excited about it. I will say, I mean, you can read his resume. I don't need to do it. He's very distinguished, and they love him at North Carolina, although I detest their basketball team quite frankly. Unless they're playing Duke, and then we root for them. But you know, Sam Odom is the director, and the co-director is Ann Cox. So you have Ann and Sam, and they hired a coordinator for this module development, and her name is Ann Sam. So I mean, truth is stranger than fiction. So I will ask Sam to come on up and get out of the way. Give me a moment to get oriented. Thanks very much, Larry Ressler, for that great introduction. As we often do at the beginning, researchers, professionals do at the beginning, I want to disclose that we have funding. We've had funding through special education programs. We have two grants now running RCTs for education science, and I'd like to say that I would like to disclose that I'm getting royalties from a lot of different projects, but no, I'm not, unfortunately. So today I'm going to talk about translating science into practice, autism-focused intervention resources and modules. And the first part of the talk is going to be about that translation process, and so where our work has come from, where it has led to at this point, and then where we're going, hope to go in the future. So, as many of you know, evidence-based practice, at least in our area, in education, and I think our area flows over to related services to pathology, certainly clinical psychology. I think we got our start in the evidence-based medicine movement back in the 1960s with Arne Cochrane and group, followed up by scientists work in Canada around evidence-based medicine. All this spurred on by the fact that healthcare was not being based on the most current medical evidence that existed. In the Cochrane reviews and now Campbell collaboration, to pull together that evidence about practices and make it available for practitioners in the field, healthcare workers, physicians, psychologists, educators. The clinical psychology field in the 1990s established criteria for empirically supported treatments. And that criteria have been used by other disciplines. We've drawn from it, and I'll talk a little bit about that. In education, the No Child Left Behind Act in the early 2000s established scientifically based instructional practices as the foundation for the kinds of research, the kinds of service that needs to be provided in education and in programs for individuals with disabilities, including children with autism. And now the Every Student Succeeds Act uses evidence-based practice throughout the act. So that's nice to know that we're basing our work on evidence, but how do we know what that evidence is and where does it come from? That is the sort of the devil that's in the details. So for many years, we were in the area of autism interventions. We searched for evidence through books that are titled Evidence-Based Practice, book chapters that have those names. I think I have a chapter or two about evidence-based practice, and narrative reviews of the literature that examine, pull out in a systematic or less systematic way, more or less systematic way, where the evidence is. When Larry talked about the work that we did with our National Professional Development Center, he mentioned that we had done a meta-analysis, and that's not exactly the term that's correct. Meta-analysis is a translation, a reanalysis, secondary analysis often, that examines effect sizes. And we did a critical review of the literature that did synthesize, we built the literature, but I just wanted to kind of be clear about the meta-analysis and systematic critical reviews. So there have been systematic critical reviews that appear in the literature. I want to make a distinction between the two projects that I'm going to talk talk about here. In other reviews in the literature, such as through the What-Works Clearinghouse or the Campbell Collaboration or Cochrane, the What-Works Clearinghouse, for example, or the Campbell Collaboration, it does what I would call a deductive, takes a deductive approach, meaning that a practice is identified, and then one goes out and looks for all of the information, all the science that would underlie that practice. And then uses evaluation approach to bring together that information, discards studies that are not useful, and then makes a statement about a single practice, usually. An inductive approach looks broadly at the literature and attempts to draw out from that broad literature the practices that emerge as having evidence. So in the mid-2000s, the first decade of the century, there were two reviews that used that inductive approach. The National Standards Project, that's at the National Science for the National Autism Center, began that approach in the early 2000s, and some of you may have been on those review boards. I was a part of that process early on. Their intent was to examine, to do a broad review of the intervention literature to determine what practices had sufficient amount of evidence using their criteria. When we applied and received the National Professional Development Center on Autism Spectrum Disorders in 2007, we were going to use the NSD, National Standards Project, review. But they were moving very slowly, and we had to get things off the ground. So we did a shorter review of the literature from 1997 to 2007 to do the first run on identifying practices that had evidence. And by practices, I'm talking about focused intervention practices. That is, specific procedures that result in learning outcomes of skill acquisition for a child. That's contrasted with comprehensive treatment models that pull together a large set of practices into a package that's conceptually organized or planned. So you'll see today the practices that we and NSD identify. So in 2007, 8, 9, published in 2010, our investigators did that kind of systematic review where we examined the practices that met specific criteria that we had, or that were for evidence. And I'll talk a little more about how we did that in a second review. As we moved on from the initial review in 2010, the literature continued to keep growing. As you all know, the research on intervention practices moves very quickly. So our review began in 2007. Around 2010, we've seen quite a lot of studies published. So we launched a second review, and we weren't completely satisfied with how rigorous we were in the first review. So we instituted a process that I think increased the rigor of our examination of literature. We worked with just to step back just a minute, that review was designed to inform our professional development program, and in that program we worked with 12 states to create a professional development model for teachers, students with autism spectrum disorders. And I'm not going to talk about that today, about how the practices were used, but more focused just on the resources that we generated. So in 2010, 2011, we began working with our School of Information Science at the University of North Carolina to establish a search that generated 29,000 articles. We screened all of those articles and eliminated right off the bat about 25,000 of them, and went through that sort of iterative process of then looking at the reviews, screening, looking more closely at the articles, screening, to the point that we had about 1,000 articles that had been published. We had expanded our coverage from to a 20-year period, from 1990 to 2011 to 21-year period. That generated, so there were 1,000 articles published in that time that were candidates. We then sent those 1,000 articles out to a set of reviewers in the field that had to go through training to use our review process, and then they determined whether our studies met the criteria that we felt were important. The studies were both single case design studies and group design studies. Group meaning either randomized clinical trials or quasi-experimental design studies. The reviewers were trained to evaluate whether the studies met the criteria, methodological criteria to be included, which resulted in, at the end of that process, 146 studies. And then we began looking at the method sections of those studies. That is, what were those interventions actually doing? What were the descriptions of the actual interventions? And used that information to sort those 446 studies into classifications or categories of practice. So The criteria, so we did. We established a set of categories. We used criteria for determining whether a specific practice